Let's party like it's 1999, baby. What is up, guys, and welcome to my review of the new science fiction horror film Y2K. Now, this premiered back in like March or April at the South by Southwest Film Festival. I heard a little bit about it from my buddy Sean Chandler, so it's a film that's been on my radar. It's been in the back of my mind for a while, and I didn't even see a trailer for this thing. I just happened to look at my theater under my Fandango app and said, holy shit, Y2K is coming out. I guess I'll check it out. And the Y2K virus, for those of you that may not be aware what this was, back in 1999, as the year was coming to a close, there was this big kind of a pandemic of frenzy where there was so many people afraid and so many news reports doing this fear-mongering where computer systems around the world were pre-programmed with the calendar data that would support up to the year 1999. And they were afraid that when it reverted back from 99 to 00, as in the year 2000, that the computer would not be able to distinguish between the year 1900 and 2000, and it would just cause a ton of bullshit to happen across the world in computer systems, and it would just send us back to the dark ages. Obviously, that did not happen. The clock struck midnight. We had the year 2000, and pretty much nothing happened. But it was this big cultural event. And so the concept of this film is that we go back to New Year's Eve of 1999, only when the clock strikes midnight, instead of nothing happening, all of the technology in the world suddenly becomes sentient and groups together underneath this gigantic agenda to wipe out the human race. And so you have all these high school kids that are partying at this house. The clock strikes midnight, and all of a sudden, fucking bitch. Well, that wasn't technology coming to kill me. My battery just died. So, as I was saying, a bunch of high school kids are at this party. The clock strikes midnight, and all of their CD players and VCRs and microwaves and iMac computers start to band together and starts to wipe them out one by one. So they band together to try to figure out how to stop this Y2K virus pandemic. Starting off with the positives, I thought this was a very fun idea. The Y2K virus is this silly little snapshot in time that only people in my generation really have any memory of. People that read about it don't quite grasp how silly and how much frenzy there actually was involved with it. So having this very fantastical science fiction horror take on that, like a what if scenario, is a fun thing to explore for people that are my age. Having technology gain sentience and decide to wipe out the human race, this is nothing new. This is something that we've seen a bunch of different versions of, but this is a very horror comedy take on it that has a lot of fun with its concept, tries to go in some directions that we haven't seen before as far as like the visualization of these different pieces of technology coming together, like a microwave branching out and attaching itself to a Walkman and attaching itself to a clock radio and becoming this bigger robot like Megazord type thing. It was a fun idea. I also really enjoyed the nostalgia here. Now, nostalgia is one of those approaches that modern movie making is taking that I'm kind of getting burnt out on because it feels like more of a crutch than something that's actually like a fun addition to a lot of movies like it used to be. But this is an era that we don't really see get explored with nostalgia too much. Typically, the nostalgia is for the 80s and maybe even the early 90s. This is right there at the beginning of the 2000s, where I was literally 9 years old when the clock struck midnight in 1999 going into 2000. And so hearing a lot of the music of the time, seeing the technology of the time, a kid burning a CD as the movie opens and using AOL Messenger, like all of that shit is so distinct for me because that was my childhood. I was there when all of that stuff was starting to get developed. And so it was fun going through a little bit of a time capsule with these characters. There was also a surprising amount of carnage candy in this movie. It's not an absolute gore fest, but I was not expecting the gory kills. And so when we did get them, I was very much happy about that. There's a couple of them that are pretty gnarly. There's a couple decapitations and things like that. So it's a horror comedy that actually goes for the horror, which is something you don't see very often. Typically, horror comedies stick within that PG-13 realm. They're more focused on making you laugh than actually horrifying you. So I appreciated that A24 and Y2K actually went there with this one. And finally, there is an extended cameo in this movie that I won't spoil, although I think it might be in the marketing. I've heard people say that it's not so much of a spoiler. but I at least enjoyed where they went for. This is not a person that's going to give me the amount of nostalgia and the amount of joy to see them as some others. I was into other things back in 1999 than what this person was doing, but it was still fun to see them because the movie utilized them in a fun way. So it kind of gave the third act of the movie a little bit of a jump start, a little bit of a shot to the arm to have a little bit more fun for the remaining 20 minutes or so. And now moving on to the negatives. And for as much as I enjoyed this concept, and for as much as the first 20, 30 minutes of this film, I really enjoyed and was thinking, wow, this is actually going to be a big surprise, the thing started to have a ton of problems after that first 30 minutes was up. And so two major issues with this film dropped it down significantly for me to where by the end of it, I just thought it was okay. Biggest issue with the film, for a horror comedy, they really struggled to keep the comedy going. Like the first 20 minutes or so, I think there was a number of jokes that really landed for me. I got a nice chuckle out of it. It was only me and one other person in the theater. And so me and this other person audibly laughed a number of times in the first 20, 30 minutes of the film. Once the actual Y2K virus happens and it becomes more about the sci-fi horror, I think the comedy really got shelved. And there's plenty of attempts to be funny in the next hour of the film, but not very many successful ones. And the second major issue of this movie is that you have a cast of characters here that you are introduced to. And every single character that gets wiped out in favor of the movie having a body count is almost always one of the more entertaining and one of the more engaging characters of the cast. And so the first major death that you have is the funniest person that's been in the first 30 minutes of the film. And so you're like, well, shit, there's a whole barrel of laughs that's just rolling away. And then the next person that dies was the second funniest person. And the third person that dies was the third funniest person. And so you end up in this situation where as the movie goes on, the collection of characters that you're following in this story gets less likable and less entertaining as the movie proceeds. And it's a shame that they didn't have the foresight that that was going to be an issue. Like, of course, in a horror comedy, in a concept like this, you're going to have a body count, but you don't want to get rid of your best characters first. You want to have the best characters stick around for the majority of the movie so that your movie consistently stays as entertaining as it was in the first act. And unfortunately, the group of characters that you spend the majority of the runtime of this movie with, I didn't really enjoy as characters. Most of them are just caricatures. And even the two leads of the film, where you have Jaden Martell and Rachel Zegler here, I didn't feel like they did enough with their characters to really even get me invested in their journey throughout this film, or, you know, they're a little bit of a love interest journey and where things are going to go if they survive this crazy night. They just didn't do enough there. Jaden Martell's playing your regular average Joe who's not a popular kid, but, you know, not quite like a nerd or an outcast either. And he's got a crush on the popular girls, the girl of his dreams. And so it's like this crazy larger than life event where people are dying. This is my chance to prove that I'm the guy that deserves her heart. And you just never really get to know enough about him, nor do you get enough between these two characters to really give much of a shit. Like, there's a point in the movie where he actually gets mad at her because he sees her in the distance kissing a guy. And up to this point in the film, he's really not given her any kind of an inclination that he really wants to be with her, and certainly hasn't approached her and told her anything or asked her to be his girlfriend or done anything. He just expects because he likes her, she should like him. Just mad, staring at her like, man, really like that girl. Why doesn't she want me? Fucking bitch. And I just can't get behind that kind of character. Like, we all have that kind of fantasy, and we follow it a lot with movies that take place in high school, where a lot of us that were just kind of regular Joes in high school and weren't the prom king and shit like that. You want to see a story where the average guy that nobody recognizes in the yearbook can pull the fucking prom queen. That's awesome, but this movie just doesn't earn that. And even on Rachel Zegler's side, like, she's the popular girl who's also kind of grounded. Like, she's not a mean girl. She's not like this elitist bitch. She's actually kind of cool. And you could see her somewhat liking or taking a liking to the average guy. But you don't really get to know anything about her beyond that. Like, the one scene of a context that we get from Jaden Martell telling his friend, like, hey man, I know she's popular, but she works on computers, so she's cool. And aside from just a few fuzzy moments of them looking at each other while a 1999 pop song plays in the background, they don't do anything with their characters to, like, develop anything between them. So it was very frustrating. When you have a comedy, you want to have characters in that comedy, in that horrific situation that you like, that you're entertained by, that you can get behind. And it felt like as the movie went on, any characters that did achieve that, we just dispensed of them one by fucking one. And you're just left with a group of people to follow this story with, not anybody you really invest in. And so by the end of it, it just kind of ends up feeling like a generic high school horror comedy. It feels like somebody that wants to bring a little bit of Superbad to some kind of Zombieland type film. And I expect more from A24, honestly. I was surprised to find out this was an A24 film. I know that they're trying to do more to kind of broaden how mainstream their appeal is, because for a long time there, and I was one of the biggest people that said this, they were very much like for cinephiles and artsy fartsy movie fans only, and only over the last 3 or 4 years with these more mainstream hits like Talk to Me, which being a major hit, are they starting to kind of branch out and wanting to get a little bit more of that Blumhouse action. Well, this is not a good sign for the future if that's what they're trying to do. You know, it was fine, it was entertaining, but I don't want A24 to start diluting their quality to have movies that are more mainstream appeal that 16-year-olds are going to be very entertained by, if this is what we're going to get. So overall, guys, it was a fun concept. I did get a few laughs out of it. I certainly enjoyed it enough that I would tell you to keep your eyes out for it on VOD if you want something to watch this New Year's Eve. But they threw away a lot of the best things that they had going for it with their cast members that were killed off, and the comedy, unfortunately, just did not keep up with the movie beyond the first 20 minutes. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, please click over here for all my 2024 new release reviews. I'm also going to put a review for Werewolves up here, which is the other new release this week. Please check that out. Like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss everything in the future. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.